Let's bring in the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, joining us now. I know you want to speak about the NHS, and we'll get on to that. Before that, though, what's the deal with Diane Abbott?
Quite honestly, Kay, I don't know. I've been relying on the news reports this morning in terms of the decision that may have been taken. I've seen what Diane Abbott said publicly, and I'm not involved in this process, so I'll resist the temptation to be a commentator on it, and just say that, and I say this with enormous respect for everything that Diane Abbott has achieved in politics as a trailblazer, whatever our political disagreements we've had at times over the years. I have enormous respect for her and those achievements. What I'm here to talk about and what I can affect change on is the 7.5 million people on NHS waiting list.
Yeah, we'll get on to that. As I said in my opening remarks, you are a senior member of Labour's shadow cabinet. You are potentially a senior member of the next government, and yet you are not being included in decisions about a woman that was the first female black MP in Parliament and would appear on the surface to have been treated less than satisfactorily. She has apologised after what she said last year. She's done her penance. She's being allowed back, she says, back into the Labour Party, but cannot stand at the next election. Some people that Mari has been speaking to overnight, Labour MPs, have said this has a stench of racism.
Well, look, the first thing I'd just say is I've got quite enough to worry about as Shadow Health Secretary without being involved in those processes. And the way the Labour Party is set up, the disciplinary process is rightly separate from the Shadow Cabinet, and it's the responsibility of our National Executive Committee, not elected politicians like me, to make decisions about candidates. And particularly on today, I'm very happy that those decisions rest elsewhere. And I'm sorry I'm this morning not able to shed more light on the decision. I'm sure further facts and statements will emerge from the party today, and no doubt Diane Abbott will make her voice heard too. I just say that more broadly, I'm really proud of the Labour Party's candidates that we're putting forward at this general election from a diverse range of backgrounds, experiences, perspectives. I hope that on July the 4th, people can see a changed Labour Party from the one that went down to its worst defeat since 1935 in 2019, a Labour Party that has been changed through Keir Starmer's leadership, frankly, in stark contrast to the chaotic clown show that Rishi Sunak has presided over, because he can't lead his party. Okay, he's got no mandate from his party, and it's been a circus even during this election campaign.
So Keir Starmer is very hands-on and has managed to steer the ship in a certain direction. Would you have my viewers believe that he's not been hands-on on this decision as far as Diane Abbott is concerned?
I'm sure we'll hear from Keir Starmer throughout the day, as we are every day on the election campaign. I'm sure he will be asked about this, but I just want to make it crystal clear. I'm really proud of the leadership that Keir Starmer has shown during this general election campaign. I'm not sure every member of Rishi Sunak's cabinet can say that about his leadership, given how many of them are leaving and standing down at this general election. We've got a government minister who's literally on holiday in Greece when he's meant to be fighting his very marginal Wickham constituency.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
I think the Conservatives have given up, and it's time for change.
You don't need to point that out to my viewers. We're aware of that. What qualities does Natalie Elphicke have that Diane Abbott doesn't?
Well, Natalie Elphicke is not standing for Labour at this general election either. What Natalie Elphicke and Dan Poulter represented, I think, is millions of Conservative voters who can see the absolute chaos and incompetence of the Conservatives and are putting their faith in Labour for the next general election. Neither Dan Poulter nor Natalie Elphicke are standing for Labour at this general election. They've not jumped ships to save themselves. They've come over to save the country.
You welcomed her with open arms as she crossed the floor. She called Sir Keir Starmer previously Sir Softy. She tweeted, "Don't trust Labour on immigration. They really want open borders." She tweeted, "Labour's solution to tackle the cost of living, grabbing money in taxes from hard-working British people. Same old Labour." You welcomed her with open arms in the party while Diane Abbott was still suspended.
Well, I think it speaks volumes, actually, that the Conservative MP for Dover, who has been seeing the challenge of small boats arriving on the shores of her constituency, has said loud and clear that the Rwanda scheme won't work and only Labour has a serious approach for tackling the challenge at our borders. And that's why we're going to set up our Secure Borders Command, drawing together serious crime-fighting capacity, the intelligence expertise of MI5, and use the same powers that are deployed in counter-terrorism to smash criminal gangs. That's a serious solution. And look at the Rwanda gimmick. Millions of pounds into Rwanda, not a single flight
Conservatives were talking about why you wanted to welcome Natalie Elphicke when she was so negative about your party, while still maintaining Diane Abbott should be suspended.
Well, because, Kay, at this general election, we want to welcome millions of people who have seen the chaos and incompetence of the Conservative Party and are looking for change with Labour. And so that's what Dan and Natalie represent. They're not admission. Sorry, Kay, I lost you slightly there.
Natalie Elphicke, as you said, is not standing at this election. If she's so fabulous, why don't you convince her to?
Well, she doesn't want to, and actually, do you know, I think it speaks volumes that two MPs who crossed the floor to join Labour, nothing in it for them, there's everything in it for the country. Because at this general election on July the 4th, we need to turn the page on 14 years of Conservative failure. And I hope that millions of other Conservative voters previously join Dan and Natalie in voting Labour at this general election, because only Labour can offer the change our country needs. And on the NHS particularly, re-electing the Conservatives, like giving them arsonists the matches back.
Moment. As I said in my opening remarks, my final question as far as Diane Abbott is concerned, you know, this is a hot potato for you guys. You've dealt with it very badly indeed. I don't know how it's going to develop later on in the day. Are you at all embarrassed about the way that this woman, who has committed almost 4 decades to this party and to her constituents, is being treated?
Well, as I say, Kay, and I do say this with genuine, sincere respect for everything that Diane Abbott has achieved, the fate of millions of people are at stake at this general election, not least the 7.5 million people on NHS waiting list. I have no authority over the decision on Diane. I can do something about NHS waiting lists because, unlike the Conservatives, we have a serious plan as well as an established record to get NHS waiting times down.
Yeah, and if you did have authority, would she be standing at the next election?
Luckily, that's not a problem that I have to contend with. What I have to contend with, actually, is a far greater and, I would argue, more important problem, which is how we take the NHS from the worst crisis in its history to getting it back on its feet and making sure it's fit for the future. And on that, I have both authority in the Labour Party and a plan if your viewers give Labour permission to deliver it on July the 4th.
OK, I'm a bit confused about what you're doing about the backlog, because if I look at what Sir Keir Starmer's said, he says that you're halving...
time on Diane Abbott.
Sorry?
I said that's because you spent so much time on Diane Abbott. Let's get into the Labour's plan.
Oh, I see. That was a joke. Sorry, I missed that. I was asking you about halving the waiting lists or clearing the backlog. It depends on whether it's you or Keir Starmer that we're listening to.
Well, you're listening to both of us. We are absolutely hand in glove on this issue, and we're going to deliver 40,000 more appointments every week, extra evening and weekend clinics, taking a reform we're seeing working spectacularly well in a small number of hospitals, rolling it out across the NHS. That reform matched with the investment needed, alongside doubling the number of diagnostic scanners, and not just more scanners, but AI-enabled scanners, so we can get more people through and start eating into the 1.6 million strong backlog of people waiting anxiously for diagnostic tests and scans. And we're also going to use the spare capacity that exists in the independent sector, because we're already seeing people who can afford it paying to go private, and I'm not going to see working class people from backgrounds like mine left behind. So we're going to make sure that we're going to deliver on NHS terms, free at the point of use, treatment through that spare capacity in the private sector. And taken together, that gives me the confidence to tell your viewers that within 5 years, one term of a Labour government, we can get those waiting times down to the standards that patients expect, that the NHS sets for itself, but hasn't been met since 2016 because of more than a decade now of spectacular Conservative failure and incompetence.
How are you going to pay for it?
The £1.6 billion package for the NHS is funded through a combination of closing down tax avoidance and also the non-dom loopholes that, surprise, surprise, the Conservatives have left in the non-dom scheme because leopards don't change their spots. And that's the choice on July the 4th, because there is a real risk of NHS waiting lists now rising to 10 million based on the experience we've had with Rishi Sunak so far. They are now treble what they were in 2010. They were at record levels before the pandemic. They've been rising since the pandemic. Letting the Conservatives loose with our NHS again is like handing the matches back to the arsonist and saying, off you go. Labour's got a record, the shortest waiting times, the highest patient satisfaction in the history of the NHS. We did it before, we'll do it again if people choose change by voting Labour on July the 4th.
Wes Streeting, you've got a busy day ahead of you. I'm sure you'll be asked many more questions about Diane Abbott before the day ends. For now, thanks for taking the time. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Take care.